Welcome to all the participants. I'm really excited to be part of this session, which is hosted by FDPPI. So, since the beginning of this year, right, there is a lot of hype, skepticism, cynicism, and confusion surrounding one big technology concept, which is Metaverse. So, a lot of you must be hearing this word all the time, right? Maybe news and maybe a lot of things what we do online, and there is a lot of confusion around maybe how it overlaps with existing uh, emerging technologies or past technologies like augmented reality, mixed reality, right, and relevant concepts. So in my talk, I'm going to talk about what metaverse, how it's going to impact our life, wherein we are going to be very close in some years, wherein we'll have a second life, which is what these creators of metaverse are going to talk about. And I personally feel last 2 years have accelerated the growth of creation of metaverse because of pandemic, because a lot of us were confined in our homes because of the lockdowns. Maybe we were not able to travel to our offices and things like that, and that also created a lot of different possibilities around metaverse, and it really accelerated the growth of metaverse and the relevant business possibilities around metaverse. So I personally feel 2022 is going to be the year of metaverse, and we'll see a lot of different announcements, a lot of different new initiatives around metaverse, as we have already heard, and I'm going to talk about some of them. Little bit more about me. In my current role, I'm a global technology leader and technology evangelist. Our company Delaplex, it's a global company. We provide innovative digital engineering and product innovation services. We work for very large clients across the globe. Other than that, I am regularly invited as a speaker in such events, and I like to share my knowledge on the relevant forums. Again, some awards and recognitions which I have received in past 15 to 20 years. And last year, 2021, has been surprisingly many awards, right? Close to 8 awards. And a lot of those awards were close to the work which I'm involved in, wherein I have been maybe recognized in the field of information security, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and some work on the side of contributing on the positivity aspects, wherein the event was hosted in Delhi for National Positivity Award. So very good year in terms of 2021. I know we had not so good year, right? Virtually living from our homes and things like that. So all of you must know that we are currently living in fourth industrial revolution. Those of you who have not heard about fourth industrial revolution, I'll highly recommend you that you should read a book by Professor Klaus Schwab, who is from World Economic Forum. I have given the link here, and he basically talks about what exactly is going to happen in the fourth industrial revolution. So if we go back and look back in history, the previous industrial revolutions kind of liberated humankind from animal power in the first industrial revolution. In the second industrial revolution, mass production was made possible. And in the third industrial revolution, we gave digital capabilities to billions of people through internet and power of internet and computers and mobile devices. But we need to remember this fourth industrial revolution is going to be fundamentally different. And it is going to be having a lot of new technologies which are going to fuse our physical and digital and biological worlds together. So we might be as individuals living two parallel lives, one in the physical world as I'm interacting with you, or maybe interacting through platforms like Zoom, right? That is going to be the second world, which is going to be digital in nature, and it's going to become better and better through invention and maybe modernization of technologies like metaverse. And it's going to have extreme automation and connectivity. There is going to be big drive between artificial intelligence, robotics, where we are trying to combine the cyber physical systems together. And we'll make use of technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, and all the other emerging technologies around these concepts. So we'll see a big revolution in terms of how we live, especially in the digital world and digital realm. And that's what is going to change a lot of things around us in this fourth industrial revolution. And one of the prime things what we'll notice is the concept of metaverse, right? And a lot of you must have already heard about it. If you have not heard about it, I'm going to maybe cover it at a very, very high level, right? But if you look at metaverse, it basically comprises of two words. So first word is meta and second is verse. So meta, according to the Greek meaning, stands for beyond, and verse is taken from the word universe. And so we are trying to combine two words, right? And we are trying to create some kind of another universe, right? And I come from technology background, right? So I used to use meta as a word in database parlance, and where we used to say metadata all the time, wherein we use metadata as data about data. And that's where I'm seeing like maybe a lot of synergies, right? In a way, how we are trying to create a digital world wherein we are trying to maybe live in this metaverse, right? And it's going to be extension of our lives, wherein we'll be using different technologies, and wherein we'll be seeing the use of this technologies, wherein we will be able to live a parallel life digitally. And this is going to be a virtual world wherein we'll be able to do a lot of things which we're able to do physically now, but we'll be able to do those things in the virtual world, which would be called as metaverse. So some of the examples here would be, we'll be able to like basically interact with people like I'm interacting with you now, right, through this video. But I'll have my 3D virtual avatar in metaverse, and you'll be also in the same room with me, right, sharing the same space as if I'm delivering this session, part of the same room. That is going to be something which we'll be creating in metaverse. Similarly, in metaverse, you'll be able to do shopping. You can watch some of the streaming services together. So maybe generally I speak to my friends across the globe and we do calls together. So if I want to go, say, suppose, and watch a movie together, that's not possible. We live in different countries. But using metaverse, that is being made possible. We can watch the movies together. More importantly, we can play interactive games together. There are many examples like Fortnite, Minecraft. Some of you might be already playing those games together. And a lot of those games could be played even from your mobile devices. And that is where slowly we are creating a digital world, which is comprising of real people like you and me, but we'll be interacting in metaverse using various digital objects, which are going to be created as digital representations of humans like you and me. So more formal definition. So in a way, metaverse is not a metaverse per se. That is what we need to remember. It is going to be a next generation of internet, wherein we are trying to create a decentralized multiverse, which is going to be led by a new and abundant generation of creators. So those creators would be people like you and me, and we'll be creating those digital objects and will be contributing in creation of that metaverse together. So I've shared a link here. A lot of you would find a lot of insightful information on this link if you want to know more about metaverse and maybe other details around it. So brief history about metaverse, and generally I like these sessions to be interactive. So maybe whatever questions I ask, you have access to the chat window, and maybe if you want to respond back, right, you make use of chat window and respond to any questions what I'm asking. So there is a gentleman, I'm sharing his photo on this slide. Does any one of you recognize him? He is one of the very famous science fiction authors, and he has kind of coined this term of metaverse way back in 1992, if I need to give you the hint. If you know the answer, I'll give you the bragging rights. This is something I believe a lot of you might know or might not know, but he is the man who first coined this term way back in 1992. So in interest of time, I'm going forward. His name is Neil Stephenson, and he wrote a book in 1992, and it was called as Snow Crash. And he basically visualized a lot of things in a science fiction way, more like what we saw in a movie like Matrix, wherein those were early days of Macintosh and things like that. And he visualized a lot of things about his virtual metaverse at that time, way back in 1992. And his metaverse included an urban environment wherein he was able to create a virtual city which was close to 216 maybe kilometers of circumference, right? And maybe it has like a lot of things which are similar to Earth as a spherical planet and things like that. So he basically visualized a lot of things what we are seeing in the current version of metaverse. And he also pointed out that we'll be able to interact with this metaverse using goggles. And they also named those goggles in a specific way, using which we'll be able to enter into this metaverse and do different things. And those goggles were called as GAR goggles, right? And you can read more about his version of metaverse on the link which I've shared. He was able to also create virtual real estate, and he kind of created the owner of that virtual real estate as Global Multimedia Protocol Group, which was part of Association of Computing Machinery. Even I am part of ACM as a member, technical member, and maybe I'm also invited as speaker across their forums. So imagine someone like him talking about metaverse way back in 1992. We were still in early days of our internet. And it's amazing. If you read his book, you'll see what I'm talking about. Again, one thing which generally we need to talk about whenever we talk about developing metaverse, we are basically doing a transition from our current version of internet, which is called as Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. So if we go back to the history, Web 2.0 was mostly created by web developers, and we were able to do certain things in a certain way, right? We wanted to share some information online. We were able to make progress and maybe create social networks, right? And maybe make it more interactive, created sites like YouTube where we can exchange videos and things like that. So a lot of those things were added over a period of time so that we could do a lot more on Web 2.0. But this Web 3.0, which we are trying to build and maybe create metaverse around, right? It's going to be fundamentally very different. And there is going to be a lot of innovation which needs to be involved when the Web 3.0 is going to be developed. So if I do a quick comparison between Web 2.0 and maybe Web 3.0, Web 2.0 is going to be based on some of the older technologies and older protocols, which are possibly not going to be useful when we develop Web 3.0. When we develop Web 3.0, we need to include more emerging technologies, use innovation, right? And maybe use technologies like blockchain and maybe VR, AR, XR technologies, right? Which is going to able to create us and help us in creating 3D avatars and 3D content, right? Which is what is going to be something which is going to be different in Web 3.0. Web 2.0, as we know today, I mean, there's certain lot of loopholes, as people say, in terms of the attack vectors. We are still trying to make it more secure with a lot of different technologies as far as cybersecurity is considered. But the basic premise is when we build Web 3.0, we are trying to create a more secure environment. And that's where blockchain is going to come into picture. And we are going to create maybe different aspects of creating a more secure environment so that whenever we are trying to interact or get into Web 3.0, it's going to be better. In Web 2.0, we had multiple access points. In a way, as a user, I can go on site and maybe create different identities, right? But when I go in Web 3.0, every individual is going to have some kind of single access point, right? So my identity is going to be unique, and maybe there could be some kind of biometric parameters, right, which would be automatically taken from my glasses and things like that. And that is what everyone is trying to come up with. Again, Web 2.0 had like a lot of non-compatible stuff as far as 3D stuff was concerned. It was non-digital in nature. Again, in Web 3.0, we are trying to create a lot of compatibility, right? And we are trying to create a digital life. Again, Web 2.0, if you look at it, it's more centralized. Certain companies are controlling our internet in most cases, even though we like it or don't like it. But the basic premise of Web 3.0 is we're trying to create it in a way that it should be decentralized, not large enterprises, large corporations are able to control the data which is generated by all the users like you and me, right? And maybe other aspects of internet could be governed by common people like you and me, right? And not by those enterprises. So that is something, again, we may need to look at. So in Web 3.0, again, we will have a lot of underlying technologies which are going to enable both any transactions which we are doing, or maybe we are providing maybe some kind of concrete proof of my identity, my ownership, right? It's all going to be done in a very, very seamless way. And that's where I'll be able to maybe do a lot more things in more interactive way when Web 3.0 is basically created. Again, a lot of you must know Metaverse is basically visualized and created around games. So you must have seen some of the popular games like Roblox, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto. If not, I highly recommend that you should go and check out these games, right? And what these games tell us is, as users, when we play some of these games, we are kind of in the virtual world. they have created environments. Maybe as game players, you can get into an environment where you can get a feeling of being together when you're playing it with your friends, family members, and things like that, right? And at times, most of these games provide you a lot of benefits in terms of playing games on that platform. You can also contribute and maybe buy stuff. So maybe I'm maybe part of a game like Fortnite, so I can buy a new rifle if I like, right? By paying certain maybe digital in certain digital currency, and maybe I can earn that digital currency by being more on that platform, completing certain levels and things like that, right? Which is very, very unique. And that's where these virtual gaming worlds provide you some kind of virtual economy. We also have virtual currencies, you have virtual storylines, and more importantly virtual characters which resemble to you and me in the virtual world, right? And this industry is maturing a lot. I'm sharing a link here, right, which talks about how these gaming companies are kind of creating a version of metaverse, and they are also maybe creating some of the elements of metaverse like virtual currencies, virtual economies, virtual characters, right, which is very, very synonymous there. And again, over the last year, this concept of gaming and metaverse has been kind of intervened together. And gaming is going to be very, very important and major tentpole for the metaverse, because that's how the journey of metaverse was actually started by these gaming companies in most cases. So I'm going to show a brief video. Some of you might have already seen this. So in this video, right, some of the aspects of metaverse has been showcased. So here you are seeing Mark Zuckerberg creating his own 3D avatar, right? And maybe what we can do in metaverse, right? So example is I can go a concert venue, I can have a museum, right? I can have a robot which is basically able to do a lot of things. We can play basketball together, card games together, right? Even though we might be physically separated from each other, right? And that's where Facebook has maybe made a big announcement, right, wherein they've changed their name from Facebook to Meta, and they're trying to just reinvent themselves. I know they are having some problems recently in terms of a lot of things, wherein their stock prices have gone down and things like that. But their premise around Meta is to create a kind of omniverse using NVIDIA platform, right, wherein we are able to convert 2D into a 3D information as much as possible, as being showcased here. So if we look at how Mark Zuckerberg is visualizing his metaverse as a technology, according to him, this is going to be mainstream in next 10 years. Whatever we do in the digital world is going to be around metaverse. And again, we'll see lot many users wanting to be part of metaverse, and that's where Facebook and Meta as a company now has got 10,000 engineers working on various tools and various aspects of the version of metaverse which Meta is trying to create here. And they're trying to maybe create it around Web 3.0 concept, which I just talked about a few minutes back, wherein you have one access point or login and you create your digital avatar, right? And the digital avatar could go through multiple cyber spaces, right? Wherein I can do shopping, I can do gaming. Basically, whatever we can do in our physical world, right, could be done using this digital world, right? And I've shared the link of this video and article, right? And maybe you can watch it in interest of time. Now I'll move to the next aspect, wherein a lot of you might be interested, right? In a way, we talked about what metaverse is, how it is being built, right? But there are certain important technological aspects which are going to be very important if you want to create the metaverse the way we want to. So in this slide, I'm basically showing the 7 layers of metaverse, right? Which is in the form of onion. And every layer is very, very important, right? And in every layer, we have the specific thing which should be done. So at the top layer, as you can see here, is the experience layer, wherein in this layer, we'll create the interface wherein people like you and me could experience metaverse, right? And maybe create the interfaces using which we can get part of the metaverse. So some of the examples of this experience layer could be, we will be creating games in metaverse, as I talked a few minutes back. We'll be able to create social experiences, as I was showing in that previous video, wherein I can interact with you, be part of the same room, right? Even though we might be thousands of miles apart, right? We can go to live music events and things like that. So that is the kind of experience we want to create in metaverse, so that we can basically experience being together. Then going to the second layer, it's called as a discovery layer. In a way, in this layer, what we need to do is we need to look at how will we able to discover that the experience what we are having in the first layer, right? How it is going to be there. And this layer is again very, very important, right? In a way, we need to look at different technological aspects, right? Like ad networks, uh, social networks, right? And maybe things like that, creating agents so that this discovery layer works properly. Next layer after that is the creator economy. And this is something which is a very, very unique layer wherein people like you and me who are common people would contribute to creation of metaverse. And that is where these creators create things in metaverse and they'll be able to monetize those things, right? So in this layer, we'll provide the design tools, animation systems, graphic tools, monetization technologies to these creators so that they're able to do their creations and maybe help create that metaverse and different objects, digital objects in metaverse. Next layer is special computing. This is something very, very important. Some of you must have heard. So since Web 3.0 or metaverse is going to be involving digital objects, more specifically, these objects are going to be in 3D. So we need some kind of special computing wherein we are able to take the object from our physical world and maybe convert them into 3D. And for that, we need to have maybe technologies like 3D engines, more importantly, gesture recognition. As you can see, my hand movements are there on this video call. But when I'm having my avatar talking to you, I should be able to create the same kind of gestures which humans like you and me have through my eye movements, hand movements, body movement, and things like that. And that is going to require some kind of special mapping. And there is going to be a lot more use of artificial intelligence and surrounding technologies, right? Especially to make some of these things happen. And a lot of these things would be created from your 2D objects. So there are going to be certain special engines, right? Which is going to help us create these special 3D world, right? Which we are trying to create in metaverse. Next layer is, which is very, very important. It's called as a decentralization layer. And that is what is very, very important as far as Web 3.0 is considered. And as I said, in the comparison of Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, if we want metaverse to be something which everyone wants to come and be part of, decentralization is the most important aspect. There should not be single organization or maybe group of organization who are controlling the metaverse. And that's where we need to come up with a technology ecosystem, which is going to create permissionless, distributed, and more decentralized structured. And that's where technologies like blockchain and other technologies like which are going to be close to edge computing and others would come into picture, wherein we are able to give that decentralization look to our metaverse so that we have the relevant technological aspects implementing that. Next important layer is human interface, wherein if I need to interact with metaverse, right, I may need to use certain special devices. So in most cases, all of you must have seen VR headsets, right? And there are a lot of companies who are creating these VR headsets, be it be Meta, be it be companies like Microsoft. I can go on. There are almost thousands of these VR headsets which are out there, using which I can interact with the 3D universe or metaverse as we are talking. Apart from that, we're also coming up with a lot of advanced haptics. So if you have not heard about haptics as a term, so as I'm having my hand movement, I can have some sensors in maybe installed on my hands, and whatever I'm doing, those haptic devices would be able to maybe sense, and exactly same thing could be done in my digital avatar. If something is happening in digital world to me, so in a way, if I'm drinking something, so I need to maybe replicate the same test in my physical world, right? So there is going to be certain things which are going to be around that. So we'll see a lot of smart glasses and other things which will come into picture around this human interface, and this is going to be becoming better and better. Even there is going to be things like brain computer interface, wherein companies like Neuralink, wherein you could maybe just think about something and there is a chip, maybe not invasive like what we have now, and automatically that action could happen by your avatar, because that's going to be real. Right now, that's one of the biggest challenges for realization of metaverse, because you need to do certain things in the real world, then only those things happen in the metaverse or the digital world. And at the bottom layer, we have infrastructure. This is going to be something which is going to be comprising of cloud computing, your telecommunication networks, right? Wherein we're able to connect these different data centers and all the computing devices, right? To fast internet, right? That's where we'll have technologies like 5G, and I can go on, right, which will come into picture. So if you read more about these 7 layers, I've given a link. There is a very beautiful explanation and a video which talks about all these 7 layers in even more details. So this is the technology which is going to be creating metaverse in these 7 layers, as I just talked about. Again, one more trivia, and I generally like asking these questions. So again, if you know the answer, use the chat window and maybe you can give the answer, right? So based on details what I've covered so far, according to you, how many metaverse or metaverses will be there? Can you guess, depending upon the way I've described the concept? If you know the answer, please use the chat window, right? How many metaverses according to you will be there? So this is generally a question which I get asked. That's why I'm posing this question to some of you who might know the answer. So I'm seeing some responses coming in. Okay. Very good. Gitika is saying infinite. Namit is saying 7. Wow. I mean, it looks like a favorite number from Namit, right? There is one answer from Anjali, which is 1, and that is global. A lot of answers around infinite. Irfan is saying 1. So very, very interesting answers. I would say all of you are kind of very close, and maybe all the answers are right as on today. So thought process is, see, looking at where we are as on today, there is going to be endless list of versions of metaverse which are going to be created as on today. I'm showing some examples on the screen right now, right? So these are all examples of different metaverses which have been created, right? Mozilla Hubs, IMVU, I can go on, right? So the basic premise is, as we go in future, we want to create a single metaverse. Like example could be, as we have internet, right, which is single, but you could have different sites or portals which we can go and access seamlessly. Similarly, we'll try to create a metaverse wherein you can have different islands or different versions of metaverse, as you're seeing in this example. But we'll be able to go from, say, suppose metaverse of Mozilla Hubs to IMVU, right, very seamlessly. Or maybe there is going to be some kind of collaboration, right, wherein we could have these two integrated together. And that's what the goal of future is, wherein we'll be trying to create a version which is going to be more like internet, right? We can't say that, okay, there are multiple versions of internet. There is only one internet, but you could have different portals, different site using which we are able to do different things. Similarly, here you on the screen, you're seeing different versions or different islands which would be created inside metaverse, and we'll be able to go from one place to the other place. Okay, here is example of the different players. So I talked about those different layers, right, in the metaverse technology stack, right? So you'll see some of the top companies, right, at each layer, and some of these companies are doing amazing work at those layers, right? So you'll see all top names like Meta, Facebook, Unity, Epic Games. I can go on, right? You'll find Adobe, right, AWS, Oculus, Apple, right? You'll find all the different people, and you'll see where they're concentrating in those 7 layers what I talked about. So some companies are able to create, say, maybe smart interfaces wherein I can have maybe VR headsets and things like that. Some companies are creating maybe digital avatars or 3D stuff, right, using which I can get into the metaverse and have the same feeling like what we have in the physical world and things like that. So there are a lot of details which you can find on the link which I'm sharing, where the author who has given this comparison, right, he talks about the different versions of those 7 layers and how these market leaders as on today are contributing to this metaverse. So another example, I'm going to give some examples of metaverse so that maybe we get to experience this more. So here is an example of a 3D avatar. So if you want to create your own 3D avatar, you can go to this link, and maybe you can basically create your own 3D avatar. It's as easy as that. Okay. So if you click on this link, so you need to just, so first we go to that site. We click on creating the avatar, and you select what kind of body type you have, right? You can select whatever you want to, right? So you can take a photo of yourself, or you can upload a photo.
And keep your face neutral. You can also continue without the photo if
so again, once you have this, right, so you can again change the outfit, you can change your hair, right, you can change your costume, maybe how you look, what kind of complexion you have, your eyebrows could be changed, right? And this is very easy, right? In a way, you could do this in less than maybe 30 seconds, as I'm showing on this slide. So all these two links, you can create your 3D avatars, right, which is free to create, and it's all being done from a web browser. Another example, and this is something which happened in India, and I thought I should talk about it. Some of you must have already heard about it. Not maybe here is an example wherein a guy who lives in Chennai, he had his wedding done in Metaverse. Can you imagine? And this happened this week on 6th Feb, wherein he created a Hogwarts themed wedding venue, and he created maybe all those Harry Potter characters, right? And maybe they got married in the Metaverse, right? And he spent around $1,400 to create the Metaverse himself. And again, he created a 3D avatar of the bride's father who passed away. And he was not there, but he could be there in the celebration in the Metaverse. So this just happened very recently on 6th Feb. So there is a link, you can read more about it. This was very highly talked about news, right, all over the globe. Another example of Metaverse is from Meta again. So they have something called as Horizon Worlds. If you have not heard about Horizon Worlds, basically you can create anything and everything you want to, right, in the Metaverse, which is being created by Meta in this case. So again, it has lot many features in terms of maybe creating office space, cafeteria, gaming zone. You can create world tours wherein you and your friends can go together and visit different places and things like that. So a lot of different possibilities there. So one thing we may need to remember is what Mark Zuckerberg is talking about Metaverse, right? So according to him, Metaverse would be the second best thing to a teleportation device, wherein we are teleporting around the Metaverse, and it's going to be just clicking a link. So you can go here and find out more about Horizon Worlds. Another example. So here again, this is Mozilla Hubs. So again, you can go to this site, hubs.mozilla.com. It's free to use. You don't even need an account. You just need to give an email ID, and you can create a maybe an online room, right, wherein you and me can interact the way we are conducting this meeting inside the Hubs platform. And it gives 25 people that access, wherein we can have our avatar, which is created inside Hubs, and we can basically do a lot of different things, right, as I already described in maybe some of the previous examples of Metaverse. Again, some of you must be curious, right? You must have heard concepts like NFTs, right? Wherein people are buying all stuff online, right? In the digital world, in the Metaverse, right? So one such example is OpenSea, wherein you can also create maybe certain artifacts which are digital in nature, and maybe you can sell it on this platform. Similarly, you can buy it through this platform. So if you go to OpenSea.com, you'll see all these options, right? In a way, they have given access to people like you and me, right? To maybe use non-fungible tokens, right? Maybe create, buy art, or maybe create our own stuff which we could sell online. So we have a lot of examples here. Some of this artwork and maybe a lot of these digital stuff was sold for at times for millions of dollars, right? And that is where the world is slowly going, right? So you can go to this OpenSea.io and you'll see what I'm talking about. Another example, a lot of you must be reading news. So one of the first countries, right, to get into bandwagon of Metaverse is South Korea. And here is the news about it. And they have created a version of Metaverse, right, for South Korea online. And they're trying to be ahead in the race, right, as compared to other countries which are out there. Another thing on the same lines, Barbados, which is a Caribbean nation, right, which is a small nation, they have already created their first embassy in Metaverse. So can you imagine, this just happened maybe late last year, right? And maybe people are already trying to think about how they should be part of metaverse and have their governments and maybe embassies part of metaverse. So there are going to be a lot more trends in terms of what would happen with metaverse. There are almost 12 trends which I've listed here. So as we'll spend more of our lives online, it's going to be becoming very hard to distinguish between our real life as well as our digital life. Basically, we'll be replicating our daily routines, interests, obeisance we have in our physical world into a digital world, and we'll try to create all those things in our online world, be picking outfits for our avatars, wearing them, cars what you like or you want to drive, right? And maybe creating some kind of virtual relationships, maybe buying land online, constructing virtual homes, meeting people in the virtual world, or visiting a virtual mall or maybe virtual museum together, hosting holographic meetings. So wherein I am in my room, but my holographic image is going to be projected in front of all of you in the single room, and it's going to look like as if I am there, and it's already happening in some cases. So there are different trends. If you look at this slide, and if you visit this link, you'll see all those trends in action. A lot of these things are already happening, and they're going to be realized better. So far we have seen all positive aspects of metaverse. I'm slowly going into security and ethics, considering the time which is allocated to me. So just a couple of memes here, right? And maybe this is something which happens with all of us at times, right? We as humans at times are not as ethical as we should be. That is what we see around us, considering corruption or maybe certain things what we should not be doing, right? When we created businesses in terms of following maybe proper ethics in what we are trying to do. So as an example in this meme, right, this guy is throwing an aeroplane, right? And his decision is based on where that aeroplane lands, whether I need to go yes or no, right? But what he's claiming is his decisions are always well thought out. That's not the case. Again, in the second example, you are seeing a doctor, right? And the patient is waiting for his treatment and what diagnosis or what prescription he's going to give. And the doctor is saying that, okay, I'll share the prescription or diagnosis with you depending upon how many likes I'm going to get online. Can you imagine? That's where we are going, because a lot of us are trying to derive maybe our diagnosis or maybe at times the kind of experience as patient we are going through our online medium, and that is going to change even more when we get into metaverse. So that's where I feel responsible innovation is very important. Whenever we are developing new technologies like metaverse, it is very important that we keep transparency, sustainability, right, in mind, and we are utilizing and maybe evaluating the technology stack when we are designing those technologies, right? We should keep ethics and the relevant values and missions in mind. And that is something which is going to be very critical when this metaverse is being created. So there are a lot of security concerns around metaverse, right? In a way, a lot of people think that, okay, how security would be handled, right? Because one thing, if you see a big difference between our physical world and digital world is, unless I go to a website or maybe I'm using an app, they can't track me, right? But imagine when we create a metaverse, by default, I'm part of the digital world, and whatever I'm doing, there is some company who has created that metaverse is able to track all my actions. Basically, whatever I'm doing, it's going to be tracked inside that. And that's why it is very critical that if metaverse need to be successful and people would want to be part of that, considering the privacy concerns what we are seeing, security concerns we are seeing, it's going to be imperative that security is something which is being followed from day one. So if I need to give some examples, right now, if I'm visiting a website, the advertiser could only target me right now in the current world of internet, right, using my maybe habits on internet, right, through browser, whatever I'm doing. But imagine when I'm going into metaverse, they might have a lot more data points about me, right? Maybe in the current world, it could be age or gender, right? But if you talk about metaverse, it could be my avatar, right, which is going to have its own body language, my physiological responses to certain things, the way I'm interacting with a lot of things in metaverse. And those data points could give them a lot more options to basically target me for the advertisements. So that is something, again, which is going to be very critical, and it could be maybe very difficult for you and me. Next thing which everyone is worried about is the kind of cyber attacks, right? As I said, Web 2.0 is still facing a lot of cyber attacks. We keep hearing, right, all big corporations getting attacked and their data being compromised all the time. But if you look at Web 3.0 or Metaverse, it's going to be something even more difficult in this immersive world to manage the security. Because if we look at the comparison in terms of challenges between our current version of internet and the future version of internet, where we'll be creating metaverse, it's going to present a lot of new challenges for the digital platforms, because we are going to be having a lot more touch points. So previously it could be your mobile phone with apps, or maybe your maybe a browser, right, from where you're accessing the internet. Now everything what you're doing in metaverse, right, basically is going to be more immersive, more interactive. You'll have a lot of data points around you, right, which could be monitored, right? And that's where it's going to be very difficult to detect attack or maybe new kind of patterns, right, wherein we could find out what kind of malicious cyber activity is happening, right? Because a lot of things could be invisible to us. So I could be part of a meeting where you and me and maybe others, like what we are here, right? And they could be an invisible person part of that meeting, and we don't know who that person is. We can't see him, right? Because it's a metaverse, and that invisible person can basically listen to whatever we are saying, whatever we are doing, and possibly he could do some manipulation as well. In a way, there could be certain things being done in metaverse, right, which could maybe create a negative impact on my thinking, and that could harm me in the physical world. So there are a lot of threats around that, and maybe that's where there is maybe need of creating metaverse technology, which is going to be focusing on the good aspects, but at the same time we need to look at the negative aspects like security. And that's where we need to create metaverse in a way, right, that okay, we are able to focus on issues like identity, security, again protecting kids from unwanted exposure. That is another thing which we are seeing in case of social media these days. Physical safety risks, because we are seeing already, right, using our current social media platforms, people are able to lure some of the kids to do certain things which they should not be, right? They ask them to play certain games and they get into that kind of game, and maybe at times people commit suicides and they're forced to do certain things like that. So that is something again which is going to be more and more difficult. Again, spying in metaverse is going to be something which is going to be very common, as we are already hearing in some cases, and we need to come up with framework wherein we can prevent that from happening. More importantly, as on today, when I use, say, suppose a mobile app or maybe a browser, I can have my antivirus, right, which tells me in a way if something is not right. So we need to also look at metaverse, right, in a way when I'm going inside a metaverse, how I'll be maybe alerted about some of the security issues. And maybe we need to think about security aspect of metaverse. And we need to ensure that this metaverse doesn't become a ground for mass cyber crimes and maybe part of some kind of advanced persistent threats, because we are always co-creating newer versions, newer technology, which is at times not adequately tested and things like that. So if you go to this link, you'll see all the things what I'm talking about here, right? And how it is going to impact us from the security perspective. Another example, I already talked about children's. So again, children's could be exposed to graphical as well as sexual content. They could be maybe subjected to maybe repeating some of the racist slurs, which we are seeing already on the current version of social networks as well. Again, there could be some kind of harassment. Again, they could have they could adopt a lot of extremist views from strangers, because you don't know whom I'm meeting online, right? I can pose maybe as a teenager in the virtual world, and possibly you'll not know me that whether I'm a teenager or I'm a grown up person. That's where we need to look at all the relevant aspects, right, in a way, from the perspective of cyber psychology also. So there are examples wherein people think when we get into metaverse, it's going to create more loneliness, because we would like to live into a fantasy land, fantasy world, which is not real world, and maybe we'll get completely cut off from our physical world and things like that. And that's where we need to keep in mind about the cyber attacks which will happen on metaverse. We need to keep looking at coming up with newer, stronger security mechanism from inception when we are designing metaverse. And securing this metaverse would present lot of new challenges considering the existing digital platforms what we have. And one of the big challenges is monitoring the metaverse and detecting the attacks which when they're going to happen on this new platform. And it's going to be very, very complex to detect that, because we have a lot of different attack vectors, a lot of different possibilities which would come into picture considering the immersive virtual setting we have, right? And it's going to, as I said earlier, it's going to create that invisible eavesdropping and manipulation of user psychological mind to cause the physical harms. And that's where a lot of research is going on. I know a lot of people, they are working on some of these aspects, right? So that we can come up with right recommendations, employ right tools from day one, and create a security architecture which is going to maybe help us to stay away from some of these concerns. But one thing which is worrying is, I'm quoting here, right? As you can see, there was a question which was posed to executive at Meta, and he's the CTO. His name is Andrew Bosworth. And he was asked, can the metaverse be regulated, right? So as you know, today on social media platform, right, we always see news of maybe hate speeches, a lot of negative information and things like that. And they need to do a lot of moderation online. But imagine when we get into metaverse, what CTO of Meta is saying, policing user behavior at any meaningful scale is practically impossible. So can you imagine CTO of Metaverse, right? He's saying this is going to be impossible because uh, the metaverse is so vast, right, in terms of the touch points. Maybe regulating and maybe monitoring some of the things what people do inside that, it is going to be very difficult. And they have accepted that, and they're kind of trying to work on some of these aspects. And maybe in an internal memo, Andrew, again, as a CTO, warned Meta, right, that okay, this virtual reality could be a very, very toxic environment for women and minorities, right? And he wanted that, okay, we should come up with a framework in this virtual reality, right, that we should avoid harassment and maybe some kind of existential threats and things like that. And again, there is a lot of negative news if you look at very recent times, wherein there are a lot of privacy concerns and certain things are happening on their social media platform as on today, which is creating very negative vibes in a way. If company like theirs, right, is not able to control some of the things, then it could create a lot of negative impact on us. Again, some of the legal concerns, I know some legal experts are here also. So it's going to need some new laws. And I know when we were starting this session, I was accompanied by two experts, Navi sir himself, right? And we were talking about GDPR and other aspects, right? So we might need some new laws, and maybe there are going to be a lot of new legal implications, right, of metaverse, right? Why? Because the data and how the data protection happens, right? It's going to create new possibilities there. So if you look at metaverse, it's going to create a new personal category of our personal data processing. So if I need to give an example, right, my facial expressions, my gestures, and my other types of reactions through my 3D avatar in metaverse would be maybe preserved by the metaverse creator or the platform what I'm using, right? And if you look at the GDPR guidelines or maybe other similar guidelines for Data Protection Act, right? So generally they focus on the user rights, right? And they look at protecting the data, right, in a way where the user is, right? In a way, if I am from India, right, and maybe I'm accessing the data from India, right, and my data is in India, right? So maybe data protection law would be applicable based on where I am and where that data is being created and where that is being accessed. But imagine, right, in metaverse, I could be in one third world country, right, but my data is being saved or being processed maybe at some other place, right, where I don't know where it is being processed and things like that. So again, we will not have any kind of boundaries, right, in terms of saving of that data in the metaverse, right? And maybe we'll always assume that GDPR will apply, but the kind of clauses which would apply for transfer and processing of data outside EU may need to be further clarified around this, because the location of the subject where their data is processed, possibly if it is not their home country or where they have citizenship, so that could have some maybe implication. Again, we may need to look at the location based on the person's operating avatar where it is, and we may need to look at the avatar itself, right, where the avatar's data is processed, where avatar's location is, and then we may need to determine where the jurisdiction of metaverse may fall in. because we have already seen some crimes happening in metaverse, wherein people are maybe groping other users or maybe doing crimes, right, in terms of land grabbing and things like that in the virtual world, or maybe creating maybe NFTs, right, of the same items, right, which are online, right, and things like that. So we may need to look at those legal concerns as well in great depth. That's where a lot of ethical issues will come into picture. So we might have, as I said earlier, intentional harm, hate speech, misinformation, some weaponization of technologies as well. There is going to be a lot of infringement on rights as well as surveillance, which is going to be again becoming more and more. And there is a possibility that there might be some kind of discrimination and prejudice which might happen due to bias. And we are seeing a lot many examples like that, wherein very recently a person in his digital avatar, right, maybe groped another user, as I said, right, and when he was asked by that woman, right, that okay, why you're doing it, so maybe the response was, okay, don't worry, this is just a virtual world. And can you imagine the kind of negative impact that might have had on that lady who was subjected to this kind of groping? So again, we may need to look at securing experiences of the users the way I just described, so that maybe negative incidences like groping should not happen there. And if they're happening, we should have sufficient maybe ethical framework, legal framework, right, so that we can basically have maybe the people who are committing some crime, they could be maybe prosecuted, right, if that is something they should not be doing. And that's where we need to create this metaverse in a way that okay, we can provide security and privacy as we have in our real life. That is something which is going to be very important. Again, one thing which is something we keep hearing, singularity, wherein we feel we are getting close to a day wherein machines would be more smarter than us. We have seen this in a lot of Hollywood movies. I'm sharing a book which is written by Ray, who is one of the futurists, right? And he has written this book way back in 2005. And here is one of the graphics from one of his recent predictions, right? Wherein, according to him, we are very close, right? Wherein some of these AI-based systems, right, are going to be more smarter than us, and maybe that's where we need to keep in mind, right? Whenever we are developing these systems, we are keeping responsibility and maybe AI ethics and maybe relevant areas, right? As I said, responsible innovation in mind, so that these machines or maybe the systems what we're developing might have more intelligence and more processing power than us, but there is going to be some control which needs to be driven by humans, and we need to always confirm around that. And that's where everyone is working so that this doesn't happen, and maybe the doomsday, as people call it, where the singularity happens, actually could be prevented from happening. And that's where everyone is working on, so that we make these systems intelligent, but at the same time, the control is in our hand, right? If they're doing something wrong, we could stop them from doing. So again, very recently I've joined a Swiss company which is called as Global AI Hub. They have a lot of free courses. It's a non-profit organization, and they have a goal to coach 10 million people in artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. And out of that, 5 million of them want to be women. And more importantly, this initiative is free. All these courses, what they have, say, suppose this course could be of 250 euros, but they're giving it for free to all the users for AI, robotics, data, other programming languages. And bigger corporations like Amazon, Google, UiPath, right, are their education partners. So I'm giving a link here. All of you can go and join these courses and get that global certification, right, which could help you learn some of these modern technologies which are in demand, and be part of the 10 million initiative what we have. So I'm just coming to maybe my last slide and summary of my session. So as we are seeing right around us, Metaverse is going to change the whole world. We'll be living in two worlds. It's going to be a physical world and a digital world, which would be created in Metaverse. Again, Metaverse is going to promise our parallel life, which we'll be living. Maybe I'll have a physical life, but I'll also have a digital life, as we are seeing in some cases now, but it's going to become more mainstream as we go forward. But again, we need to remember that none of the things what we see in Metaverse is real. And we need to also remember that these things, what we see in metaverse, can't possibly replace our physical lives. And we have a lot of direct interactions as users, maybe in the physical world. But if you do the same thing in metaverse, we might use technologies like holograms, but holograms possibly can't replace our human emotions. Similarly, it's going to be very, very difficult for metaverse to become our second digital life. And we may need to maybe think from the perspective of cyber psychology, and we should not get addicted inside metaverse so that we feel imprisoned inside it or we can't live without it. That is something which is being observed in some cases with some teens and kids and things like that. So keeping that in mind, we may need to look at the purpose of metaverse. It should not become a tool for predators. It should not be an unhealthy escape from reality. And we are not living in the fantasy world. We need to create metaverse in a way people are thinking they are in a digital world, but they should not be creating an avatar, right, which is completely different from their physical world, and they're just getting into a fantasy land, right, just to maybe run away from their day-to-day life in the physical world. And that is why we may need to keep some ethical aspects from the security and privacy perspective in mind. And that's where metaverse needs to be created in a more decentralized way instead of creating it in a very, very centralized way, as I was describing earlier. That's where technologies like blockchain and other surrounding technologies will come into picture, so that we keep metaverse as much as possible open source in nature. It should not be created by certain faceless corporate bodies or powerful individuals, and they dictate their own terms. And maybe it should not be governed by certain people who have the money, right? And more importantly, what I feel is your data, when you are part of metaverse, should not be sold to the highest bidder as it is happening today. And you should be able to control your data, use it, and if you want, you can monetize it yourself, right? But you should not relegate control of your data to someone else who has created that metaverse. And that's why I feel we are responsible when this metaverse is being created. And if you're going to be part of the metaverse, you may need to keep all the relevant aspects in mind. So again, I'm sharing some of my past articles around some of the emerging technologies, so you can go and read about them. And my advice to all of you would be, we should be riding the train of these emerging technologies, right? And be part of this journey instead of maybe not following along and not being part of this journey, right? And maybe get impacted negatively by these technologies. So I would like to quote our ex-beloved president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He said, excellence is a continuous process, not an accident. So I would request all the participants today that whatever you have learned through this session today, try to practically look at the enormous possibilities of metaverse and how we can make India a technological prowess from the perspective of creation of this metaverse, and how we all can contribute in a positive way when that metaverse is being built, from the perspective of security, privacy, building the relevant aspects and things like that, and make India one of the leading players when the metaverse is being created. So with that, I would like to thank Advocate Dr. Mahendra Lime, Navi sir, and everyone at Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India for this great opportunity. I'm sharing my website link, my LinkedIn profile, and Twitter and Facebook page. So if you have any questions, you can possibly share them, and maybe I would like to request the moderators to take up those questions through chat or maybe direct interaction. And maybe if you're not able to get answers to your question, I'm more than happy to maybe interact with you, right, through online portal, as well as if you would go to my website, you'll find my email address there as well. So with that, I'll give it back to uh, FDPPI moderators so that we can discuss some questions if audience is having.
So, Dr. Rizwan, I think it was a spellbound session, and I think you will require point 2 and point 3 follow-up programs to answer these questions, because there would be huge questions related to metaverse and whatever fears you have regarding ethics and privacy issues. So first, you have to promise that you will be there for answering another session, because I think due to shortage of time, only few questions would be possible in this particular sessions. But I request a few of you who have their questions, which Dr. Rizwan could answer in this, say another 5 to 10 minutes, they can unmute themselves and ask their questions. But before handing over question and answer sessions, I will just thank again Dr. Rizwan for this totally innovative topic, which has been very new to as far as privacy issues are concerned. And as I started earlier, it has opened Pandora's box for so many questions in, say, from legal perspective and technological perspectives also. So thank you for these wonderful sessions. And now those who want to ask their questions, they can unmute themselves and ask their questions.
Dr. Rizwan, Asha here. So I really love the talk, and my question would be: is Delaplex or some other Indian companies working towards creating this reality?
That's a very good question, Ashay, and there are a lot of players, including us. So we are working on a lot of innovative stuff. I can't speak in the public forum about that, but I think there are a lot of initiatives, right? We are working, and there are a lot of other Indian players, right, who are part of this. So very recently, I was part of a boot camp, which was hosted by IIT Madras, and they have maybe a lot of things around AR, VR, XR, right, which is something which would be needed around Metaverse. So what I'm trying to tell you is a lot of private players as well as government players like IITs who have dedicated labs wherein they're coming up with a lot of the building blocks which are necessary, as I was talking in my talk, right, to maybe create the Metaverse of future. And there are a lot of private companies like us as well, maybe considering conflict of interest, right? I'm trying to name, not name them, but if you approach me one-on-one, right, I'll be happy to share some of those names.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashay, and thanks for joining, and thanks for that question. Okay, I see a lot of interesting comments in the chat as well, right? So if you have any more questions, I can take.
Dr. Rizwan, I have one question. When CTO of Meta has a lot of doubts about the ethical part of this particular technology, and these are all commercial organizations who want to bring this particular metaverse or whatever 3.0 you have spoken about. So if these are the, say, fears in the minds of creators of this particular technology, would it be appropriate to introduce this technology when the inventor of technology himself is not sure about its benefits or its future?
I think that's a very, very relevant and pertinent question. And maybe that's what I try to maybe highlight as part of my session, right? That's what these different corporates, right, who are trying to create their own version of metaverse, right, need to keep in mind. And as you can see, right, this question was posed to him, right, in one of the interactions, and it was an impromptu answer. If you go and Google about it, later on, there was a big clarification which was given by his company. In a way, they talked about how they are investing almost 10 million or $10 billion. I'm forgetting the exact figure, for creating privacy and security aspects from the perspective of the fears what everyone had. So short answer to your original question, I would say, is all these different islands of metaverse which are being created by these different providers, right? Somehow there needs to be some kind of moderation and consortium being created, right? Through some kind of policy framework, right? And maybe advisory organization like maybe W3C, right, which governs internet, right? And they need to be involved. And they wrote a paper way back in 2008 around the same topic. So a lot of those things are being maybe come up with. A lot of private as well as public players are trying to come together, right, so that they can come up with a framework, right, so that some of these big concerns which everyone is having, that could be elevated, right, and maybe we could be creating more secure version of metaverse, which is universal, open, right, and at the same time, lot of concerns which I talked about in my presentation, right, they could be all addressed. So we are very early days. I'm hoping in next 1 to 2 years, right, this is something which is going to be even more formalized, and we can come up with frameworks, because I know some of the big security researchers, security companies, they're just working on this aspect of securing the metaverse. So maybe I'm hoping like next 1 to 2 years, as we are able to secure internet as a whole, and metaverse is going to be web 3.0, which is going to be extension of web 2.0, as I talked, we should be able to create frameworks which is going to help us create a more secure version, which is going to be something to protect all of us. And one technology which is going to maybe drive that is blockchain technology, and we're going to use a lot of terminologies and a lot of algorithms around blockchain so that we can create that trust. So I see a hand going up.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, I'm Kodandaram here. It appears it is simply a maddening situation will create where people would like to simply escape into this world, and they may not know the realities of the real world, and the real world progress will be more diminishing, bad, damaged wholly. That's what I wrote also. It's just similar to a drug addiction. This may be even worse than that. You may not have any escape route. To that extent, it may make us unwise. Is there any way that it is going to benefit in the real world, complement the progress in the real world, rather than to create a separate world which has no meaning? That's what I feel. Your opinion, please.
I mean, that's a very pertinent question. I mean, in a way, a lot of people think, right, that metaverse should not be created, right? Or rather, when we are talking on metaverse, right, it's illogical. We should not be talking about it at all, right? But looking at where we are, right, and how these immersive technologies which are being created globally, it's going to be pertinent, right? Looking at how things are being created. One day, this is going to be reality, right? Whether we like it or don't like it, it's going to be there. Now, going back to your question, right, where you talked about addiction, right, and maybe living that in that fantasy world and how we can avoid that. That is something where we may need to come up with a framework, right? Even if you look at today, some of the tools what we use, right, including the social media network, they give you options wherein I can restrict my usage at a particular time of the day, and I should not be getting addicted to that. They give the tools, but nobody uses that, and that's what they claim. So that is where a lot of work need to be done, right? So that people, when they're living in metaverse, they should not get addicted to it, and they're following certain, I would say, physical and virtual world life balance, right? And maybe we get to be we come up with some right balance, and we create a framework so that we are not getting imprisoned, as I said in my talk as well. That is something which we need to work on, and that's where I said cyber psychology is going to be something which we need to think from a big perspective. I see Navi sir want to say something, and I see one more hand going up, right? So maybe I'll let first Navi sir speak, and then we go to Meena Lal after that.
No, we are looking at this development of what we today call as metaverse, right from the days when secondlife.com was there. That was my first interaction with the metaverse. Basically, it's an interesting game environment, but the moment this virtual life becomes integrated with the physical life, like when secondlife.com introduced the Linden currency, and then there was an exchange running between US dollars and Linden currency. And on the secondlife.com, you could earn Linden, you could spend Linden, convert it into dollars. This actually, the secondlife.com ceased to be a game. It became even a place for actually keeping my money, monetary deposits. Instead of keeping it in dollars, I will keep it in Linden. No tax authority will know about it. Okay, that was one. There was also a report, whether it is true or it is only a fiction in the serials, that the criminals used this secondlife.com kind of virtual place for meeting and planning crimes. Okay, because that's a better meeting place than anywhere else. If you go to Google or say exchange Gmail or something like that, somebody may be tracking you. Now, this, and also there were many legal issues. I have actually looked at least 2 legal issues which came at long time back. One was in Second Life when a real estate property, somebody hacked into it and then created his own real estate property without the approval of the owners of the secondlife.com. And that case went to the jurisdictional, say, physical court. And I don't know how the court understood all these complexities of what was the property, when, where was it purchased, what was the rights, and so on. Similarly, in one of the cases where a cafe was there, somebody had built up assets in the cafe at a price. Somebody hacked and then removed the assets, and that became a theft of virtual asset. So the physical courts were confronted with these crimes in the second world, secondlife.com, and I'm sure they were not able to properly handle it. Now we are coming with this metaverse, which of course you put on your goggles and then have immersive experience. And definitely, as Rizwan pointed out, there is a cyber psychology kind of issues, because we have seen how addiction in the case of that blue whale kind of games created. People went to the extent of taking out their own lives and also taking the life of somebody else. And this immersive experience could lead to something like that. And I don't know where we can control these things. Of course, technology is something that if you really want to control, you can control. But that control parameters will be held by, say, Meta creators, whoever it is, the Facebook or somebody. And unless they become ethical, okay, you cannot enforce ethics. If the CTO of Meta says that I cannot do it, it means that they are not willing to actually control. That's my view, because otherwise in technology, as much as it can be misused, there could be security controls which could be created. Only thing is we should be willing to do it. So same thing applies whether it is Twitter or any other today. Whatever crimes are happening, fake accounts are being created. If the owners want to control it, they can control it. But if it becomes a commercial aspect, that I am happy to have more fake accounts, I'm happy to have crimes happening in my metaverse, then it becomes difficult. So that is the difficulty which we will be encountering when this actually takes more and more popularity. Very difficult, but it will happen, because the way cryptocurrency is developing, we know metaverse also will become very attractive, because our youngsters will be quite happy, because for them there is no difference between game and life. Only we are all old people, so we think in a different
youngsters
way.
are able to play game right online and earn digital currency, right, which they can trade for money. So they are becoming more addictive to that, right? That's what is happening. So there is a mad race.
As far as privacy is concerned, one thing which comes to my mind is metaverse can itself be a privacy control gateway, because avatar is created. Now the mapping of the real personality and the avatar is with the metaverse owner. So if you are going to a website and there you are using your avatar, it's like a pseudonymization. So if they want to act in a manner in which the world order is retained, then it is good. But we don't know where we will be going. But technology is taking us to places where we do not know. So let us keep our thoughts in check right now and see how things develop. Yeah, thank you, Rizwan, for actually stimulating so many new thoughts. Okay, one has to explore this further. Let us see how things go. Yeah, Meena Lal has got something to add.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Rizwan. It was really, for me, it was an exposure for the first time to this new terminology, which I heard just 2-3 weeks ago. You all must have been very conversant long time ago itself. You see, this entire conversation reminds me about a book which was written by Pearl S. Buck. The title of the book is The Good Earth. The debate was whether we should create an atom bomb or not, whether it will be destructive for mankind or it will be constructively used. However, having had all the debate, mankind constructed the atom bomb, and we all know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But my question is, it's actually going, the entire conversation is actually taking us to the root, which is human rights, correct? So, and you know, Mark Zuckerberg himself, when he came to India, perhaps he made a statement which is reported in the press that AI should be regulated. So my question to technologists is, you know, there is a forum which is United Nations Human Rights Commission. Now, in that commission, are the technologists playing a constructive role to say, because, you know, when technologists can create such technologies, it's actually they who will create a path to mitigate and to use it intelligently or constructively. So are the technologists playing any role in awakening, creating this entire awakening? The way the world is talking about climate economy, are the technologists playing any role in creating an awareness at the international forum so that something like Paris Convention happens and, you know, the countries sign up to it and they become far more responsible, as you stated your last phrase, that be responsible. So are you aware of anything of that kind?
Absolutely. I think I have just done a session last month, right? The topic was responsible AI, right? And what I talked about is why it is first of all important when we are developing these emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and other things, right? And why we need to maybe develop them more ethically and more responsibly. And the complete facets we're giving, what challenges we are facing, right? And some of the inventions and maybe tools which are developed using these technologies are really biased and they're not working the way they should be. In fact, one example, one of the largest manufacturers of driverless car, they had like 12 crashes, people died because of that, right? And there are a lot of concerns around that. So going back to your question, right, there are a lot of consortiums across the globe, including India, right? Even Niti Aayog has written a paper on responsible AI. A lot of people have contributed that side. Similarly, EU is coming up with a guideline, right, how we should develop some of these things more responsibly. There are going to be certain maybe legislations in different countries, right? Be it UK, US, right? And wherein technologies are part of some of those recommendations. In a way, they're contributing to some of the aspects. So I have a complete talk on that topic. I can maybe at least talk for an hour, right? And that is something which is happening at a global scale in India, outside India. And people like me are also involved, right, in some of those initiatives. Even as you know, like on the data protection side, right? Navi sir is doing a great job, right? So similarly, when we are building some of these modern AI and maybe emerging technologies, there are different forums which are created through UN, World Economic Forum. I can go on, right? There are people who are part of those recommendation bodies and technologists and futurists who are looking into these aspects. And there was a slide, right? That Singularity slide. It was part of my presentation, right? And that's why I brought it up, right? Because unless we develop these technologies responsibly, right, we are kind of creating more problems for ourselves, because if the bias gets increased against us, right, as humans, it's going to be difficult for us to live our life, right? Maybe, and it's going to be becoming more and more digital when Metaverse gets created. So short answer is there are initiatives, people are contributing, they're representative from all big corporations, maybe even maybe technologists, futurists, right, who are contributing depending upon their subject matter expertise, and even people from education background, right? I mean, India example could be people from triple ITs, IIMs, IITs, right? They're also coming forward and maybe giving their suggestions on some of these aspects as far as India is concerned. But it needs a lot more efforts in terms of maybe formalizing this process even better, right? Because the technology is changing at a very fast pace. But people who are responsible to bring some of these frameworks, right, they're more doing more like a catch-up. Navi sir might agree with what I'm saying. In a way, we are behind, right, in terms of doing certain things proactively.
Absolutely.
We are doing most of these things reactively, and that's where a lot of work needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, I know I would like to interact more. There could be more questions, but I do have few things, right? Mahendra sir, if need be, right, we can have a follow-up session. Maybe I'll be more than happy to just talk about certain specific aspects, right, and take more questions. But once again, it was very interactive, as I could see in the chats, the kind of questions what with Navi sir's presence and your presence, the other audience. Really, thank you so much for having me here.